This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
A recent survey revealed that Canadians plan to spend more on Christmas this year. They don't have to, although with all the obligations that come with the holiday season, it's not a surprise that they will. Well, what if you want to tighten your budget? What if you've got debt? How do you still give when you've got limited cash? Is there a proper Christmas gift etiquette when you have too much debt already? What about regifting? You can save money doing that, but is regifting wrong? It's a tricky subject, so today I've got a first-time guest who knows a thing or two about etiquette. So let's get started. Who are you and what do you do?
Good morning. My name is Lisa Orr, and I'm an etiquette and protocol consultant.
Ooh, I don't know what that means. So what does that mean?
So that means I work with individuals and schools and businesses to help them work on their etiquette and protocol skills. So that's everything from table manners to business etiquette, international protocol when people travel overseas doing business there. So kind of all the different topics is at individual and schools and corporate.
So what is etiquette?
So my favorite definition of etiquette is it's a sensitive awareness to the feelings of others.
A sensitive awareness to the feelings of others. Okay, so that...
Yeah, and so more broadly, etiquette's really about thinking about how your behaviors impact other people and determining how you can modify your behavior so that that everyone has a positive experience. So it's this kind of dance that we do with each other to also to conform to kind of social expectations that we do have within different cultural groups.
Well, and we're social people, so if you can't get along with others, then you got a big problem, and I guess that's where etiquette really helps out then.
It can really help.
Knowing what you do. Okay, so let's hit some actual real stuff here. Because I don't understand, the diplomats and all that. That's not my thing. So, number one, tipping. You know what tipping is, right? You've heard of this, right?
Yes.
So, what's the general rule of thumb? Is it okay not to be generous with, tipping around Christmas? And, what if you can't afford to do it all? So, are there some alternatives? Like, what is your general approach to tipping?
So tipping is definitely the most challenging subject for people because... That's
why I started with it.
Yes.
You see, hit you with the hard ones right off the bat.
It is a great one. And I think the answer with tipping is there are a few areas where there isn't a lot of wiggle room. So tipping typically includes only the personal services. So not your professional services like your accountant or your banker or your lawyer. Unfortunately,
I'm an accountant.
Unfortunately, that crew is typically excluded and it's not appropriate to tip them. But your personal services, so if you had a hairstylist
So just out of curiosity, yes. Not to divert the attention to us accountants, but why?
That's a good question. And part of it's about social convention.
It's just the way it is.
Yes.
And I guess part of it is, I don't tip my doctor because the guy's making pretty good money. My accountant's making pretty good money. Is that a big component of it?
I think that's part of how the behavior evolved was that in service-based industries, the reality is tipping does manage or make up for a difference in wages. People aren't being paid quite as much. And so we feel this obligation to give them a little extra to make up for the fact that they're not really being paid what they could be. And in some countries, they've actually managed that by raising minimum wage and including service charges so that it's no longer the consumer's obligation to tackle it. But in Canada, we're not quite there yet. So we still have to follow.
And we could certainly do an entire show on that because, well, maybe the whole answer is we should pay people what they're worth and then we wouldn't have to do that. But we're not there yet. So, okay, so back to tipping then. Are there rules of thumb?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me some rules of thumb.
So, so the one place where it's really hard where you're really committed is in the restaurant industry. So there's so many people that rely on a tip when you give a tip that it's the one area that there really isn't a lot of wiggle room. So and that number's been going up. Historically, it used to be there was this expression "tip the tax" in Ontario, but now it's closer to 18% is what you'll see for reasonably good service in a restaurant. Lower end would be 15%, and then in some cases you'll see up to 20%.
So if I tip 20%, they're going to think, "Hey, we like this guy."
Yes,
so that would be the upper end.
That's the upper end.
Okay.
And then the one thing to always remember, is to make sure that you're tipping before tax, because often the payment terminals will include the amount that's after tax.
I see.
So when they do that percentage calculation, and if you've had a big group and you've had 6 people out for dinner and you tip 18% on top, it can start to become I mean, that's not what you're meant to tip. And it's one thing to be generous, but it's another thing to be unintentionally generous.
Right. So if I'm not a rich guy, but I still, hey, I had a nice dinner and I'd like to be fair here, then the answer would be take a look at the bill, the subtotal line before the GST. We don't have PSD in Ontario anymore, but the 13%, I guess, gets added to it. Subtotal line, and if you want to be really generous, well, 20% of that, which is a lot less than 20% of the total number.
It is, and I think it's really important too, because people are afraid to ask, and I think it's always important. I'll go back to, if I'm not sure, I'll ask my waiter or my waitress, can you just confirm for me where this, what is this percentage? Because sometimes the machine will ask you just to tip a percentage.
And so what happens because I'm sure you're always going out with 20 friends, right? And they just say, oh, you got 20 people, we're tacking on an extra, automatic gratuity or something.
Yes.
So how do you handle that?
So I think if you've got a big group, it's reasonable to expect that they're going to add the gratuity. The thing that I do ask the restaurant, because I book, I often organize groups like that, I make sure that they're adding that 18% on the pre-tax amount. Because that's really what they're supposed to be doing, rather than what the payment gateway makes it easy to do.
I see.
So that's kind of what you're agreeing to.
Yeah.
Typically, when they say we're going to add an 18% service charge, so it's just making sure that they're doing what they've agreed to do.
So on the bill, if that was the pre-agreement, then it would say, subtotal, here's 18%, but then the tax should be on not the 18%.
It should be a separate. It should be a totally separate amount that's not taxed.
Well, and of course, by the end of dinner, you've had a drink or two, and you're probably not be able to do math of 18% in your head. But so, okay, 18% would be the general rule of. Well, that would be the kind of a typical number now for a decent restaurant. Now, you said you don't tip accountants, but you do tip other service providers. So other than a restaurant, who else would potentially get a tip?
Hairstylists are a big one, and people often tip their hairstylists so they continue to get appointments and so that they get a good haircut, which is also important.
That's my secret there. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
critical.
Yeah.
So they're kind of in the 10 to 15% category. Sometimes people will do, there can be a range. I know people who tip more. I know people who tip less. A good rule of thumb, if you're not sure if it's a new stylist, is to ask, if someone referred you to them, ask them how much they tip. And that'll give you an idea of where it falls, just so you don't make a misstep. Mm-hmm. Getting that information can be hugely, because otherwise you might be over tipping all the time and never know it,
or under tipping and they're mad at you and you get a bad haircut.
So you see, both are a problem.
We don't want that.
Yeah, and then there's also this drivers. So if you've got a taxi, then they're kind of in the 10 to 15% range. Some people don't quite qualify for tips, but you might see kind of end of year bonuses. So someone who's a dog walker or someone who provides regular service to you, you may not give them tips all the time, but you might include a bonus at a year end. So it's kind of like a tip, but not a regular tip per service. And those are typically the cost of one visit. So let's say if it was a dog walker who comes to you all the time, but you don't really tip them, you might leave them a small bonus of the cost of one visit. But those definitely fall into the more optional categories. Restaurant is very hard and fast. Driving services, hairstylists are a little more flexible, but then you have some more leeway in those bonus categories.
So if I can summarize that all as a rule of thumb, the answer is ask.
Absolutely.
Find out. So, okay, what is everyone else? I don't have a dog walker, so I don't know what that is, but ask around, okay, and even with the service provider, like you said. So if I was to refer someone to you, I think that's an excellent angle. If I was to refer someone to you, what kind of tip should I tell them is standard here? And that way, at least you know where you're at in the thing. So, okay, so that's tipping. Now, an even better topic, I think, is re-gifting.
Yes.
Okay, so someone comes and gives me a gift, and I don't know, it's a bottle of wine. Okay, and I'm not a big drinker, so I'm not going to drink it. Well, I got to go to a party next week. Why don't I bring that same bottle of wine? Makes sense, and as a money-saving technique, that's fantastic because you've just paid zero for a gift. Are there any problems with that? Are there any rules I should be following? Where is that going to backfire on me?
Yeah, so with regifting, a good rule of thumb is if you could buy that same object today at the store, then they could return that object. So a bottle of wine is a great example because in theory you could take it back to the LCBO even without the receipt, I'm pretty sure, and just take it in. So then you could absolutely regift that. If it's something that you couldn't do that with, so let's say it was like candles or some kind of consumable like a tea or something that you couldn't just purchase. that way, then that's where it starts to get tricky, because then it's hard to say when the person receives the gift, you can't really vouch for the lineage of that item. Right? Because maybe it's Aunt Martha's jelly and you're not quite sure about that. So I feel like that's where, for me, that's where the line is. And so in those situations, it's not that it's a no, but you might say, so often what I'll do, I've been in that situation. So I was given some candles, but I couldn't use those candles. And so I gave them to a friend at a party, but I said, I actually received these as a gift and I love them, but I couldn't use them and I thought you'd really enjoy them. So I can still use them as a gift, but to be on the safe side, if I give people context as to how I came into that lovely present, then it gives me a little more flexibility.
So if it's a standard type item that I could go to the store and buy,
yes.
Okay, well, probably not a problem. If it's Aunt Martha's jelly,
Yes.
We all know Aunt Martha's jelly, so you don't really want somebody to be dying because you gave them this gift. But if it is Aunt Martha's jelly and you say, look, my Aunt Martha made me this jelly and she's great jelly, but, we're all on the keto diet now and I can't eat this jelly, you're not on that diet. Would you like that? In that case, you're probably okay.
Yeah. And I think it's, I think in this era of trying not to be so wasteful, I feel like it's better to keep things moving forward if you're not going to use them. And as long as you give people the history, and it's you're not trying to be sneaky, then it's a good thing. The only thing to be mindful of is if when giving that gift would make the person who gave it to you upset, then you may want to reconsider. So
I see.
So if someone gave you a vase.
If Aunt Martha finds out I'm giving away her jelly,
yes.
Wait a minute, I made that. I stayed up all night making that and giving it to you. Just for you, and you've given it away. So,
yes.
Or some other special type item that I looked all around for that particular thing and gave it to you, and now I find out your next door neighbor has it.
Yeah. So if giving it is going to hurt the giver substantially, then you may want to reconsider.
Yeah. So gifts that you get, you're at your company and you get all sorts of stuff coming in. Well, okay, then.
Yeah.
That's probably definitely fair game. So,
absolutely.
Okay, so tipping, yes, you have to do it, but regifting, yeah, you can do that too. So that's good. Now, this is a show about debt, okay, debt-free and 30, that's what we talk about. So I want to talk about people who are listening to this now who don't have a lot of money. Maybe they are in debt, but okay, it is the holiday season and we're all getting together and, the way we've always done it is my family gets together and we get gifts for everybody or we draw names or something like that. Well, I can't really do it from a financial point of view. How do you broach that subject?
And it can be, I think one of the things that comes in around etiquette and etiquette around money is that we're all there. I don't want to say there's a taboo, but I feel like money and etiquette.
There's a taboo.
That's like the etiquette around money is one of those areas that people get really uncomfortable talking about. It's why they don't ask about tipping or ask about regift. We just sort of get really concerned. And I think when we're transparent and authentic, it's our family. Of all the people that you should be able to be transparent and authentic with, it's probably them. So my advice is always to have a conversation. Typically, it's nice to find I don't know if in my family there's influencers. It's to find a family member who's kind of got the ear of the group, and someone sometimes the matriarch or patriarch, but it doesn't have to be, and have a conversation about your situation and say, this is where I am. I really can't afford to do gifts this year. Maybe it's zero. And then have a conversation about how you might solve the problem. So you may have some ideas, they might have better ideas, but then at least you've got an ally in getting to your goal. And also an ally who's empathetic, who's saying, thank you for telling me. I wouldn't, because most of the time your family doesn't want to put you into debt. We're just trying to find a way to celebrate together and enjoy the holiday.
It's a fun thing, yeah.
It's supposed to be, but once you're putting yourself in a position where you're worried about paying your rent or your lease next, in January, just because you got everyone gingerbread houses.
Yep.
That's not the goal for anyone. So I think once you shine the light on it, then you can start. And then there's all kinds of creative ways, because it is supposed to be fun and a great time to celebrate family. Then you can get creative about how you celebrate without spending money.
Okay, and so I'd like to talk about that. Now, can I regift a gingerbread house?
So do you know the origin of this?
Okay, that's the
house?
key.
That's the key.
So obviously, I'm not regifting if I made it. If somebody else, so probably know on the gingerbread houses. Okay, so creative ways. So again, we've got this tradition where the 10 brothers and sisters all buy presents for all the brothers and sisters and kids and everything, and it's just too much.
Yes.
So So I go talk to the, grandma who's everyone respects and loves and got the ear of everyone. And she says, yeah, no, there's a couple other people in the same situation as you. Okay, that's a good sign. But we still want to have fun over Christmas. What could I suggest then as an alternative?
Well, so one thing that works really well is to using kind of Secret Santa or single gift solutions is a much nicer thing to do, because I come from a huge family. So my mom has 6 brothers and sisters. I'm one of 17 grandchildren. We are massive.
That's big.
We do not exchange gifts because
you'd all be broke.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a time when there was a lot of gift exchange, and it shifted, I would say about 15 years ago, because of exactly that. It had gotten ridiculous. And so now, so at first we don't do gifts at all. So now we just spend time together. That's where we've shifted to. We do cards, fun cards. But it's the act of everyone being together, that's the gift. I mean, because we all come from all over the place to be together, and that's really what we appreciate now. But in the first place, what we did was we drew a name, and we actually made it only for the children, because we felt like it was the little people who really, as a grown up,
Christmas is the best thing in the world when you're 5. Like, there's nothing better than that, right?
So for the little children, and then we set a theme and price limits. So we made it, and the goal was you had to make the price limit you made the price limit really low. Like typically it was sort of like 10 to 15, really, really like an affordable price point, and then you'd set a theme and you make it fun. And then, you can do it with adults too. And I always think the lower you make the price limit, the more interesting the gifts get.
Because you got to put some thought into it.
Absolutely. Or you can get super creative and say it has to be kind of an exact dollar amount. And that makes it really fun too. Yeah. Because you have to
$4.99. Exactly.
Exactly.
And so you're picking a theme. Give me an example of a theme you could pick. It could be like, it's got to be something to do with sports, or it's got to be something to do with food, or it's got to be something like that.
Yeah. So those kind of, you might have common interests as a family. So let's say everyone watches football and you all love football. Or if it doesn't have to be that specific, or if there's something that you love to do over the holidays. If everyone likes liking cookies, maybe it's different cookie cutters. Maybe it's, there's all different kinds of, it all depends on kind of the interests. That maybe you've got a family of quilters. Who knows what, every family has these kind of different hobbies.
Well, how can a cookie theme go wrong? That's like perfect. Who do you know doesn't like cookies, right?
Well, and you can make all different kinds. There's healthy cookies and less healthy cookies.
There's no point in healthy cookies. That's just ridiculous. So, okay, so you are replacing everyone's got to spend a lot of money with everyone's got to put some thought into it, but there are ways to do that. Now, are there ways to do it where you're spending zero?
100%. Because it's not, so all that you're doing then is you change the paradigm. So then you say that you have to spend $0. So when you're doing this game, and so when you do that, so you might use, like, maybe I'm going to write you a letter, and I'm going to write or make you a poem about how amazing you are. You can find ways to, I'm a big fan of silly poems. I like to write them. There's no good reason for this, but I find they're great ways to celebrate people and do cute things. You could make collections of old photographs. As an example, like, there's different ways to show people that you care about them, that you want to celebrate the holidays, that they may require some of your own time. So there's dollar value to that, obviously, but no actual kind of output of dollars. And often those gifts are the most heartfelt, which is, ironically, it doesn't take a lot of emotional energy to hit click on the online store.
Yep.
Whereas to really think about a person, or to find a photograph, or to write about a memory that you had, that's a lot of energy and caring. Yeah.
Buying everyone the same kind of coffee mug. Well, okay, boom, I order 50 of them and here they all are. It doesn't take a lot of thought, whereas what you're describing does. So what do you do then? So I think these are very practical answers. And so for people who don't have a whole lot of money, or maybe have tons of money but don't want to be spending it on stuff that's going to be forgotten in 2 days, these are obviously practical things. Now, what do you do in the case then where either you yourself have debt, and I guess you've kind of answered that. Well, we have a discussion about it. But what about the case where that other family member, I know they're suffering, I know they've got a bunch of debt, maybe it's your brother-in-law or whatever, and I don't want them to be uncomfortable. How do you broach that subject?
So I think in those situations, you have an opportunity to kind of be a leader for your family and set a model. because if you think that typically if you've got one family member who's suffering with debt, the reality is, most of us could benefit from spending less over the holidays. And so, if you know that that's the situation because it's, as a team, your family's going through this really together. If you can say, hey, you know what, I think we've all maybe spent a little bit too much this year. Why don't we all spend less, rather than if you know that's going on? Because I know if I was in that, and I always think if I was in that position, how would I feel if someone helped me out that way, didn't call me out and say, I know you're in trouble? Because sometimes not everyone's ready to talk about their debt right away, and often they may be in a situation where they want to spend more to kind of cover up the fact that there's stuff going on. So that way it takes all the pressure off, and and that's really the gift you're giving them for the holidays, to say, you don't even have to talk about it. We're just going to take this all down a notch this year. And then, if we win the lottery next year, we'll talk about it.
I like that. Be a leader.
Yeah.
That's excellent advice. So, yeah, you're the one who stands up and says, here's what I think we should do this year. So, we're all going to make the big meal together, and your job is going to be, mashing the mashed potatoes. That's your thing this year. Okay, well, you're giving me something to do. I'm participating. I think that's my sister's job, so she won't want you to take that then. So, and is that the same answer then with gifting in general when you're talking with, your friends who, well, I get together with my friends every year and we always do something, but I'd like to take that down a notch too. Is it exactly the same? Be a leader and have that conversation with them?
I think so. The only challenge, and that this comes up quite a bit, is there's often people run into the situation where there's one person who says, well, I still want to go here for dinner, or I still want to spend this amount of money. And that's the only challenge you can run into when you're trying to lead this more economical chart. And there's this double benefit of when even though it's sort of economically responsible or financially responsible, it also shifts the focus to the right topic. It makes you focus on the people. It makes you focus on spending time rather than the commercialism, which is what I love about taking that kind of approach. But I think the thing to be mindful of is if you do get someone who's not on board, who's just like, I don't care, I still want to buy gifts, I still want to get gifts. The thing to remember is they can choose to do whichever they've done. If they want to give gifts like that, that's fine. You've now set your intentions. So I think you kind of have to let that go, that some people may just not get on board, and you won't be able to convince everyone. But that next year, maybe, once you've just sort of set the playing field, then.
Well, and this podcast will come out before Christmas, but shortly before Christmas. So this may be the kind of thing where, well, that's what we've done in the past. Maybe this Christmas is when we have the discussion about what we're going to do in the future.
Yes.
That this was great, but I remember when my kids were little, there was one year we got them tons of stuff, and the best thing they got, the boxes.
Always. It's always the favorite.
Boxes, those were awesome. And so we realized, well, if we'd gotten them 2 or 3 things and a bunch of boxes, that would have been great. So we realized, but you have to live through it and make the plan for next year. So this is the year to make the plan for next year if it's too late for this year. It's a great time to, anytime you're in the moment is a great time. My strategy always when I'm trying to make a change with my family or consider a new approach is have it in the moment when that holiday is happening. Otherwise, for really any holiday or when a birthday is happening, say, hey, you know what, this was amazing, but next year maybe we could. I know my brother and I, when we first started he and I do a booze exchange. We used to buy each other presents, and it always got complicated, and so we decided every year I get him a bottle of wine and he gets me a bottle of wine, and so we're flat, and because we would have bought the bottle of wine anyway. Yeah, it's all good.
But it's super fun because we both get to give each other a bag and everyone's happy.
Yeah.
But it's funny, we had the conversation one holiday because I wasn't sure what to get him and he wasn't sure what to get me, and we're grown-ups, and we went, you know what, why don't we just do this?
Yeah.
And then that was it forever. And it's been amazing but is it the easiest time? It's hard to have that conversation in October.
Yeah.
Where it's where it feels so. But it's not, you can, but if let's say you didn't get to have it, I think once you're in the heat of it, that's,
do it now then. So,
yes.
And so this year, is he getting red or white?
That one I don't know yet.
We're not there. Okay. So he'll have to wait till Christmas to find out.
Exactly.
So, okay. 2 more questions I want to ask you. Should I set a budget for, tipping and gifting and Christmas in general? Or are there other strategies I should be thinking about instead of that to make sure I'm conserving my cash?
from my perspective, I do like the idea of setting setting a tipping budget, knowing that's going to be part of what you have to spend, because it can get to be a lot. You may find that even just tracking how much you're tipping, maybe you're a good first step, because I always think it's hard to set a budget till you know what you've tracked. Yeah. So that's kind of step one is
I'm not going to tip more than $100 this Christmas. Well, last Christmas it was $500. You're totally out of the loop here.
Yeah, and then you're going to make people upset. So I was saying step one, track your behavior, see how much you actually, in kind of your normal course, what you felt made people comfortable, figure out how much that was, and then you can adjust your behavior for next year. So maybe that means that maybe there's less services, because tipping is really a function of how many services you have. So maybe say, well, maybe I'm going to go out for dinner less, or I'm going to make more food at home, or I'm only going to get my hair cut twice a year. I mean, whichever things you're going to do to cut back, because tipping really is just an extension of your broader budget. So I always think it's important. You can't start. I find it's very difficult just to cut cold turkey without any information.
So there has to be some thought to it. Okay, now here's my pet peeve. You go to the grocery store and they ring it up and they say, oh, would you like to contribute $2 to our own grocery store charity? And I'm always thinking, well, I'm an accountant. Okay, I understand how taxes work. And I'm going, okay, no. I know what's happening here. I put the $2 in, and at the end of the year, the grocery store can say, hey, we donated $100,000 to charity, which of course they did, and it was my money. And then they get the tax break for it. And that just ticks me off. I would prefer to decide what charities I'm going to support, research them, make sure they're in alignment with my values and everything. I would like to decide how much I'm going to give them. I would like to send the money myself, and then of course I would like to get the tax break for it too. That's secondary in my view, but that's also important. So my answer when I'm at the grocery store is no, I'm not supporting, the big bad grocery store chain. Now, I feel kind of bad having that discussion with the cashier who's sitting there going, look, dude, I got to ask the question to everybody or else I get fired. I don't like asking it any more than you do, but that's just the way it is. So is my mentality wrong on this? Or how would you handle the same thing?
So I totally agree with you on that situation. I mean, everyone makes their own decisions. So there may be people who choose to give in those situations. My answer when people ask is either just no thank you and move along, or if they seem sometimes people get quite assertive.
Yeah, like you're a horrible person for not supporting our charity.
I've been asked like, well, how could you not want to support this charity? It helps these people. And I'll say, I really wish I could. Unfortunately, because you don't give tax receipts, I can't. So I can't factor it into my annual giving budget. But if there were tax receipts, I would definitely consider it. And that's actually how I tackle giving all the time. When it comes to giving, is my family, we set an annual giving budget. We know exactly, because that's how much a tax receipt you're going to get. We have our different charities and we research them, and then they receive their, and that way at least I know. So for all the phone calls, for all the people who reach out, that's how I tackle them, because it's not that they're if you gave to everyone, there wouldn't be anything left to give. Yep. And so you do have to prioritize.
You got to pick your spots, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think people should feel badly about that. I think to be making active choices about what charities you're going to support means that you are actively helping people versus passively helping them. And I feel like they should be, selfish. I feel proud of actively making choices about who I support, versus a passive support means you don't really know who you're helping or why you're helping them. And charities are amazing, but not all of them help in the same way. And so you can, when you do your homework, find charities where your dollar can really make a difference. And I feel like that's just kind of what we're doing when we're giving, is doing a little homework so we can make our dollars.
Well, and I like that, active versus passive. So yes, absolutely, you should be supporting causes you believe in. You shouldn't be supporting causes that just because they happen to pop up, because that means that $2 isn't going to the cause you believe in. It's going to something else, and who knows what it is. So
it actually really helps, especially this time of year. Sometimes there'll be people come into the office and say, oh, there's a drive, or I need to support this team, or and there's some pressure in the workplace to support different charitable situations. So that can actually be a way to manage that social pressure, which can happen sometimes. It happens all through the year, but it's a nice way to manage that pressure around charitable giving, because if you say you've got your own plan, it's hard for people to say, well, whatever on your plan, support me anyway.
So your specific line would be?
So it's unfortunately, I can't support the charity this year. We've already decided on our annual giving.
We've already decided on our annual giving.
Yeah, but what I always invite people to do is they said, if you want to give me the information, I'm happy to consider you for next year's plan. Because we create a plan and then we execute against it at the different points in the year.
Yeah, obviously things will change over time and
and there may be new charities that come in and others that go out, or your budget might increase. But I think, and that makes it I think when you've got your language as to what you're going to say to people when they come to you, instead of panicking and feeling guilty, instead you feel confident and know exactly and feel good and proud of the choice you're making.
And I think that's key. You've got a plan. So when the question is asked, I already know what the answer is. I mean, this is advice I give to people when you're dealing with collection agent calls. Well, if you already know what you're going to say when they call, then you're not panicked when it happens. So now you have brought with you a couple of old etiquette books.
I have.
Because this is one of your hobbies, of course, collecting old etiquette books. So give me an example of some etiquette advice from, yesteryear, as it were. What are the kind of things that, I would have learned in the past? So
one of the things I brought, I think, is dress code is one of my big things. It's funny, I get a lot of questions around dress code in this day and age. It's one of the most complicated topics, because what is business casual? What do you wear?
When I started as an accountant 30 years ago, you wore a suit.
Yes.
That was it. You wore a suit. So you didn't have to, it didn't matter if it was Friday or Monday or the middle of the summer or whatever, you wore a suit, and it was probably a white shirt and a dark suit, and that was that. So, but not the case anymore.
It's a real challenge, especially for young professionals, as to what to wear. It's a challenge for organizations as to what to tell young professionals to wear. So it's anyway. So I always love reading these. The guidelines used to be so exceptionally specific, and there was a whole set of rules around clothes for boys and clothes for girls. So one of the things that I loved was that for girls, they said a good suit or plain well-tailored dress is necessary in every girl's costume. And I just thought,
costume, yes, absolutely.
And so that was, a dress was the only option. And there were a suit or a dress, which I thought was, I know many girls today who own a suit, and the number of dresses that they have, and then also around the different types of, like the big faux pas with men in tuxedos. So this is a list of things that boys should be aware of, and this is actually an etiquette book for children, it's the Etiquette Junior book.
And this is a Canadian book, then, is it? Or?
This one is the American book.
Version, okay.
My Canadian version was. I have this wonderful Canadian book from the Toronto District School Board it's unfortunately so fragile that it doesn't transport well. Yeah. It sort of starts to peel away.
We don't want that.
As you move, I might have lost it by the time it got here.
Yeah.
So this one is American, but one of the things I love is things that boys should be aware of. So tuxedos before 6, because obviously all boys have a tuxedo.
Yeah, so don't wear a tuxedo before 6.
Don't wear.
Okay, that's very good advice.
Gray vests with tuxedos. Colored handkerchiefs with tuxedos.
Can't do that. No.
That's apparently a disaster.
Very bad.
Loud checks.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's shocking.
And this is advice for boys.
This is for boys.
So this isn't 40-year-old men. This is, you're 10 years old. Make sure you're not wearing a tux before 6.
Yeah.
Wow.
Versus my 10-year-old, I'm excited if he'll,
Hey, you got underwear on. Fantastic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I can get him out of track pants, we've had a good day.
It's all good. So, the world has certainly changed. So that's, I'm sure we should do 5 shows just on old etiquette books. So what final advice then would you give our listeners? And I mean, you've given some really good practical ones here. And I think, being active rather than passive, being a leader, thinking, those are all pretty good things. How would you summarize it? I
think the key to being successful when managing kind of these sticky situations is to never be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid of being judged. I think that's the thing that holds so many of us back, is that we're so afraid of being judged for what we don't know. And the best way to solve the problem of what you don't know is to ask, and then you do know. And I think most of the time when you have the question, other people have the question. And as long as you ask with humility and clearly are interested in finding the answer, most people are willing to help, and you can get to a place where you feel comfortable with what you need to do, and typically people are happy to have helped you get there. And I think that's I think once you feel like you can ask for help, then all of these topics that seem scary, that seem taboo, where you're afraid of being judged or being ashamed, kind of that all goes away. And all these social things now become really fun things rather than scary things.
Yeah, ask. That makes perfect sense. Well, that's an excellent way to end it. How can people track you down? Do you have a website? Where can they find out more about you?
I do. I have a website. It's oretiquette.com. Same.
So that's or with 2 R's.
ORR. That's the one.
And you'll have to look up how to spell etiquette, people, because we can't do that for you. Oretiquette.com.
That's the one.
Is how they can find you. Lisa, thanks very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The holiday season is a difficult time of year if you're in debt, so hopefully all the stuff Lisa said today will help you survive and thrive during the holiday season. I think we've had some very good practical advice, so I think that's been fantastic. That's our show for today. A full transcript and links to Lisa's website can be found in the show notes over at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.